when you have a child, it's your heart living outside your body. And I still feel that even though my first heart I gave birth to is now 6 foot.
Well done. We won't be going there again.
Hello and welcome to the Waterstones podcast. I'm Will Rycroft, and in this episode we're going to be looking at the unique bond that is motherhood. We'll be travelling back in time with Maggie O'Farrell as she tells us how writing about Shakespeare's family and the loss of their son Hamnet helped her to connect with another mother across over 400 years of history. And in the studio we're joined by an author who has one of those CVs that puts the rest of us to shame. Author, presenter, actress, blogger, vlogger, podcaster and Celebrity Mum of the Year 2016, Giovanna Fletcher has attracted an army of fans thanks to her honest look at modern motherhood. With all that she has to juggle on a daily basis, we are thrilled to have her join us here. Welcome, G.
Hi!
Hello.
I love being here. Thanks, guys. Yeah, not been Celebrity Mum since 2016. That's really sad, isn't it?
Well,
the other 3 years that followed,
yeah,
I'm not up to scratch.
They found better mums.
They found better humans. Yeah.
You need to up your mum game.
I know.
It's all right. It's fine. I mean, there's time to come back, you know.
I can pull it back, can't I?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
there's always time.
Right.
Holly is here too, of course. Welcome, Holly.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello.
You have already sung the praises of your mum on the podcast when we were talking about the perfect roast dinner. With Jay Rayner.
I'm not just the roast dinner.
I'm not. What I was about to say is she a woman of many talents.
Oh, she's fantastic. She's just amazing. I love her to bits.
Well, we're gonna have to get her on the podcast, I think, at this rate.
We can't. She's so outspoken. It would be horrendous.
Oh no, is it really?
I'm worried about what she said.
Yeah.
That's what we need. What, in a sort of sweary way, or
no,
just outspoken?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. We should get both of our mums on. Just see
We
what
can't
happens.
imagine. A day off for us.
Possibly go wrong. G, obviously you've written both fiction on your own and with your other half, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
You've written a best-selling book on being a mum.
Mm-hmm.
You've turned that into a super successful podcast series. And now you're back with letters on motherhood. Could you please stop making the rest of us look so lazy? It's very embarrassing. I'm only joking with you, of course, because part of the success of your books on motherhood is your honesty about the sort of the pitfalls and the failures along the way. Was it that encouraged you to write about motherhood in the first place?
Yeah, so I was sharing online. I think let's go back. So when I first had Buzz, I was looking at everyone else, especially on Instagram, and wondering how they were getting it right and I was getting it so wrong. Yeah. Everyone was smiling, everyone was happy, and I just felt like I didn't quite match up. And at the time I was doing a blog for Hello magazine, so I'd kind of blogged throughout my pregnancy, and then I'd blogged the birth, which was amazing. I had an amazing experience with Buzz in that labour, and then I just found myself going, well, I've written this blog about how happy and amazing that was, but right now, a month in, I'm not feeling that at all. And I found that even though I thought I was a really maternal person, that it all come naturally, I'm naturally the maternal one in any group setting, suddenly it wasn't natural, and I just thought, what did I think I was doing? Like, I'm not a natural mum at all. This isn't easy, and I've made a terrible mistake, and I just thought I can't be the only one thinking this. So I did a really honest blog about breastfeeding and how hard I was finding it for Hello. So they never really got any say in what I was putting up there. I think the only thing I got on that one is that I said boob and breasts too much, which if you're talking about breastfeeding, it's going to come out.
It's going to crop up.
So they just edited a few of them out. That was fine. And the response to it was amazing. And I just think, actually, the response when you're speaking honestly is so much bigger than when you are sugarcoating. So that kind of encouraged me to talk more and more about how I was feeling. So I kind of balance it up. If I post a lovely picture of us all in the park, I'll put in a reference to the fact that we had a meltdown 2 seconds after or before, and then it's actually just a tiny fraction. Because I think so much of us, even though we say that we don't, we try not to, we can't help but compare ourselves to what we're seeing. So given the reality of it. So this is one question. I'm still talking.
No, please do.
So that encouraged me to start writing, because also I was writing fiction anyway, and when we were going on book tour, people would say, are you writing a book? Would you think about writing a book about motherhood? I was like, well, there are loads of advice books. Loads of people have said, this is how you do it. And actually, I read all of the books before giving birth. The kids didn't. That was really inconsiderate of them, which meant that I knew what I was doing, but they didn't know their part of it. So I kind of, plodded along and found them actually they made me not listen to my instinct. Instead, I was constantly in my head, all these different voices of, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. Who cares if it's all like contradicting each other? Those are all the things you should be doing. And actually, when I pushed all those away and just trusted my instincts, that's when I became a little bit better at being a mum.
Yeah.
Or just, trusted in myself a bit more rather than constantly doubting. And so it did seem like a natural thing to write about motherhood, but not in a way that it's an advice manual.
Yeah.
Definitely not that. But more in a way of, this is me, being honest, and with all the highs and lows and all the successes and failures, and all of us have that, and those failures don't make you a bad mum, in the hope that seeing someone else's failures or like admitting that would boost other women up.
As you say, because it's not like there isn't a manual to raising a child, because there are so many books out there that are sort of are there to give you advice. Mm-hmm. But actually, when it comes down to it, and we had a home birth, and I remember the moment at which the midwives left our house, we were suddenly alone with this baby, and we were like, are you for real? You're just going to leave us with this thing that's alive and here all of a sudden? And we didn't know what we were doing. Yeah. And it's completely terrifying. So that all the reading you've done, all the preparation you've done, doesn't actually prepare you for that little thing looking back at you going, well, I don't know.
I know. And their only form of communication when they're so young is crying. Yeah. Which is so difficult. And I can remember reading so many times, you'll know what the different cries mean. Yeah. You'll know there's a different cry for this. It's just a cry. Yeah. It's just really loud.
And stressful.
And you can't, in the moment, you can't even think. I didn't get on very well with the advice books, all that research that I did.
Yeah. As you say, there's something to be found, the comfort to be found in somebody else going, do you know what? It's really hard. And you're not going to get it right. Yeah. And that's okay. Because I'm sure we all remember the moments from our own childhood where we had meltdowns, things went wrong, and we've all turned out to be, he looks around, relatively well-adjusted people. And because you talk as well as that thing about failure, you talk about guilt, which is often associated with when mums want to go back to work or when mums want to do something other than being a mum, which is a hard thing to admit to sometimes because you're supposed to be all rosy-cheeked and having a lovely time with your kids, but actually sometimes you're like, can I just have a break?
Yeah, totally. The juggle is a massive thing. And for me, even last year, it's something that I really struggled with. I struggle with the juggle and the guilt that comes with it. Because especially having 3, I think then your sense of responsibility ups. And that sense of, I can't let other people have these 3 children because that's a lot. And so in my head, I was kind of telling myself that it's okay. My me time, I didn't need me time. My me time was my family time. And, that's all I needed. Didn't need time on my own to do anything just for me. Me time, family time, that's good. The rest of the time I'll be working. And actually you realise that is just a lot. Like to be constantly working or constantly chasing around after 3 boys and not giving myself any time to just be is you're going to end up having some sort of meltdown yourself. And just realising last year that just even a half-hour run 3 times a week is amazing. Just getting out of the house, and nothing changes. You can be really super stressed. Nothing changes. You're out. You're not thinking about all the things that you need to do. You get back. Everything is exactly the same as it was, but something in your mind has just lifted. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm a much better person when I've been for a run or done something physical. But yeah, that guilt. I just kind of have to realise that what I've found is that it will always be there, so it's learning to live alongside it and weighing up when I have to really listen to it. Interesting, I just saw a friend before coming here, and she was saying that I'm really passing this second, third hand information here, but someone posted this post over the weekend about the juggle and about mum guilt and how we always see it as you're juggling glass balls and plastic balls. So there are certain balls that you just shouldn't allow to fall because they will break. And we always are told to see family life as the glass balls and work life as the plastic balls. But actually, there's loads of different balls, and each part of the 2 have plastic and glass balls within them. So there are certain things like drop off or pick up, plastic ball. Do you know what I mean? It's okay. Yeah. If you're not there to pick up your child one day, obviously someone else has to be, but it's a plastic ball, that's fine. School nativity, glass ball. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Whereas there's other things in the work life where there are glass that you do have to kind of commit to and put first. And it's okay. It's okay to have that juggle and to allow yourself to have glass balls in other areas. which I thought was literally just had that conversation. I was like, that is amazing.
That's very good.
Yeah.
You mentioned there as well about running, and there's a lot of stuff in this new book about the body, about your body as a woman and how it's changed. And again, this is all part of the sort of slight conspiracy of silence that sort of exists around motherhood, which is we don't talk about the fact that your body changes for the rest of your life.
I know, and in the book I do really go quite in on that.
Well, you develop devote an entire chapter to the part of your body that is instrumental in the delivery of children.
The tunnel, some might say.
But it's like, again, that kind of honesty about to sort of say, to your own body, you are amazing because you have been through this extraordinary thing and you have created these brand new human beings, and that actually not enough credit goes to the female body because, of course, what you get is a lot of shame about how it's changed.
And something that actually I spoke about in Happy Mum Happy Baby, which then brings us onto this book where I've actually addressed it even more. The only thing I can think if anyone's saying about, especially downstairs, is a man saying, like, this is a general thing that I have heard a lot of time coming from a male point of view when watching your woman give birth, your partner,
your good lady,
is like watching your favourite pub burn down, and how it's just awful. It's so degrading, and it just puts humiliation, shame. It makes you feel unlovable, like you can't be seen, and actually it's something that I've just again thought about over the last year when I'm 3 babies in, I don't think I'll have any more, and I have to look at my body and find parts that I love and have to accept, and just give credit where credit's due, I guess. And I hope that, I don't know, for me, I kind of write things without really thinking about who's going to read them, knowing that if I really feel passionately about it, there will be someone who connects with it. And even on the podcast, having people in and sharing honestly about stuff, it does still now make me go, oh, I need to give myself some love in that area, or I need to readdress how I'm thinking about that, or you've really changed how I see that. And I just hope that the conversation has to be a bit bigger than favourite pub burning down, and actually hearing women talk about it, as opposed to someone who doesn't even have one.
Well, exactly. I mean, I'm part of it. Here I am, a man, talking to you about motherhood, but I think maybe part of those shaming comments is to do with the fact that men, at the end of the day, know they can't do it. They can't perform that miracle, and therefore, actually, what's the point of you other than being a sort of sperm donor? That's basically it. And so I think that sort of that shaming and that kind of control over women's bodies.
And I guess not really knowing how to talk about it.
Yeah.
So turning it into that lads banner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, bore off. Do you know what I mean?
One of the only aspects of their lives that they can't actually control. When they see their partner in labour, they can do as much as they can, but actually that is not masses in the grand scheme of things, really. And I know, as you've kind of done hypnobirthing, the man is much more involved in that, and Tom really was in those births. But I think that for some men, they are just so detached from that situation, they've got no idea.
Do you reckon it's also that emotional aspect as well? They don't know how to articulate or talk about that emotional aspect of welcoming their child into the world. So they kind of rebuff it, I guess, or kind of sidestep it by talking about something they know will get a laugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not even 50 years ago. It would be completely normal for the man to not even be in the building, let alone in the room helping. You'd be down the pub with your mates whilst she's giving birth with the midwife, and then you'd find out later what she'd had, what it was called. Well, it's sort of, they were completely. Whereas now we have a slightly more sort of joined up partnership thing. But even so, I think, as you say, men are a bit like, don't quite understand what's going on here.
Yeah. It's just a massive thing, isn't it? You've literally birthed a baby. You can't sidestep that and not even think that's going to have any effect on your body.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you can't forget it.
No.
There's a whole human to show for it.
Yeah.
And
and it will talk eventually.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, not your foof, but your child.
That's a hell of a party trick.
You never know.
And you also talk about how becoming a mum in a way changed your relationship with your own mum, because you then have this sort of whole new appreciation of what she has been through, which you can't really, I suppose, understand until you've been through it yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's only when I'm met with challenging situations with the boys, and I think, God, how did Mum cope? You know, she didn't drive, first of all, so we would literally be on buses, and I just think for her, she was a bit she was very strict, and we knew with Mum to just go with her. Like I say in the book, she's got this famous time where, like, we bring it up probably every time there's a family gathering, where we went to someone's house, and we weren't even that bad. But as soon as we got in the car, Mum sort of did this, clapped her hands, and we just sat there waiting. Well done. We won't be going there again. And rather than shouting at us, that's what she said, and we were all just like, oh God, we're in so much trouble. And it was that there was a fear, but a respect. And I don't know what my mum and dad think when they come over to ours now, and it's just carnage. But at the same time, so it was really interesting. So Mum read an early copy of the book, and I've showed them both sort of their letters and stuff. And my mum got quite teary. And I said, what's wrong? Like, she said, do you think I'm a good mum? I was like, Mum. So then I got really choked up. And what the conversation that we then had made me realise is that actually I worry about that now, but it's a conversation that I'll always be having with myself. I'll always be having those doubts. And I think as your relationships change growing up, you know, you start seeing them more as a human, and you've got to kind of give them the love that they deserve. It's so weird to think of my mum bringing up me, my sister and my brother. You know, it's but she needs us now in a different way. It's just really interesting.
So the change in the relationship.
Yeah.
Ollie, obviously you're not a mum yet, but I wonder whether
how's the book put you off?
I was going to say, what is it like reading the book? Because it's such an accessible look at what motherhood is like. Does it sort of fill you with, as you say, it's not an advice book, but it does give you an insight into what it's like to actually be a mum in the real world?
I think through part of it, and also the sharing from mothers on social media, it just garners further respect that I have for mothers out there. And I think now, from seeing when say a child is having a tantrum in the street, or they're being noisy in the silent carriage on the train, I think whereas even a year ago I would have been like, oh, this is so frustrating, I think actually just let them be, and that is a child and it is so difficult. And I think through that sharing and honesty has come that complete mutual respect that we now have, hopefully, as a growing up generation, and that's how we feel.
We have there are cultural differences as well. So in this country, we have this thing where we look at other people and their families, and they're sort of over there somewhere. Whereas if you go to mainland Europe, somewhere like Spain, for example, where children are sort of celebrated and loved and allowed to stay up much later than they are in this country, and other people look after your kids whilst, you know, you're needing a little break. And we weirdly don't have that here culturally. We just we look at parents struggling over there and kind of go, well, they should keep that bloody child quiet.
And we think a lot of people have kind of moved away from home as well, so you don't have that network that you would have had sort of 50 years ago, where you all live down the same street as your family. And you know, so it's because I've seen comments on posts that I've read before where people have said, well, we never had any of that and we were fine. It's like, no, but you had your friend next door, or you had so-and-so, so you can't really I think comparing different generations of being a mother doesn't really help anyone. It's just a way of them kind of, I don't know, processing what they experienced, I guess. But yeah, so it's very hard, isn't it, to I just think we're all very singular now, and the way that we look at other women, other mums or dads when they've got a screaming toddler is so important. Because for me, on a personal level, the hot sweats, the mum sweats that I used to feel, especially with Buzz, just thinking that everyone's looking at you, everyone's judging you, oh my God, I'm a terrible mother, that person thinks I'm a terrible mother, and that's not ever, well, I'm sure there are some people that would think that, and that's fine. But you know, it's much more encouraging and helpful just to have someone go, you're doing okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've taken us back, the idea of sort of looking back a few generations to sort of how motherhood might work. We're going to go back even further now. We're going to go back over 400 years, in fact, into the past. Our next author does this with her new novel. Maggie O'Farrell has written about motherhood in both her fiction and, in fact, in her memoir. It's a stunning memoir, I Am. If you haven't read it, please read it. It's incredible. It detailed the challenges that she has faced as a mother of a daughter who has life-threatening allergies. In her new novel, Hamnet, she uses the life of Shakespeare's family and the tragic death of his son as the springboard for a very moving look at mortality, motherhood, and grief. She spoke to me, first of all, about bridging that gap of history.
Well, I think writing about Agnes's children and having of her children, I think I wanted to kind of form a connection between me and her, if you like, because, it's the first time I've written about very deep history, I suppose, in a sense, so I had to try and get myself into the skin of a woman who lived in, the sort of late 16th century, which isn't that easy, as soon as I started doing my research. I've read other historical writers saying that they were amazed by how these people are the same as us, where I actually felt the opposite. As I began research, I realised that these are people who've never tasted sugar, who've never worn cotton, who, and I think it seemed so alien to me. These are, so everything in a household like the Hathaways or the Shakespeares, everything they ate, everything they wore, everything they used would actually be probably made by the woman in the household. All the, obviously some kind of tool would be used to make the cups or the dishes, but everything the children wore would have to be sewn. So as a mother who could, in a modern day where if my child grows out of a vest, I can order some more online. That felt so alien to me. The kind of labour involved just in their daily lives, keeping these children fed and washed and dressed, was astonishing to me, and it felt very, very distancing. So in a way, I think, writing about Agnes's experience of motherhood, because one of the things I found when I became a mother is that I was amazed in the kind of after event, how much of it felt like some kind of ancient undertow of biology. You don't, when you decide to have children, you don't think that that's going to happen to you, but it is like a kind of atavistic, biology takes you over almost instantly. You're driven by your hormones and what's happening, and then this kind of bonding experience felt very ancient, very atavistic, like I felt almost like a cave woman again, protecting my youngling. So it was fascinating, a fascinating process for me to go to, and I'm still going through. Obviously, my youngest child is only 7, and I think also there's the idea that when you're a mother, you never quite get over. You never quite lose that sort of mental umbilical cord. I think children do, and I think that's healthy and good. But I think you don't. I think you're always thinking about them. I read somewhere someone said that when you have a child, it's your heart living outside your body. And I still feel that, even though my first heart I gave birth to is now 6 foot, I still feel that kind of. I wonder where he is, and I'd like to know roughly where he is and what he's at. I mean, obviously with 16, you never quite know, but to be honest, which is also good and healthy. But you as a mother, you can never quite sever that connection with them, I think. And so, that was a kind of something that I felt unified me and Agnes in a sense, because that hasn't changed. I'm sure she probably felt the same. Women in that time felt exactly the same, but I think the threat they must have felt was far greater than what we feel. Obviously, you look at the statistics of how many children under the age of 5 died, or how many children, survived their first year or their first month, and it's horrifying. I mean, it's so horrifying. You look at these parish records, from Warwickshire, and there are families who lost, 8, 9 children, who buried, 9 children or so before they were even 5. I mean, William Shakespeare himself had 2 older sisters who died very young, and then he had another sister who died age 7, and I mean that was fairly normal, unfortunately.
I was going to say actually that you've written about your own family, and we're talking about hundreds of years between the Hathaways and where we are now, but that you have an everyday experience of the perils of illness.
I mean, obviously, I think the kind of life that I have is light years away from women in Elizabethan times, what they had and what they were. The sort of opportunities or education or anything available to them, but I do think there are obviously huge commonalities, and I think particularly probably in the rearing and the giving birth to children. I think that's what I wanted to explore really in this book. But I do think, I mean, obviously that I don't think that worry goes away, because obviously their worry was so much worse. You you could cut yourself and within a week you could be dead of sepsis. You know, they didn't have any antibiotics. There was nothing, you know, obviously. And I have to cope with a lot of, our family has to cope with this kind of medical condition of my daughter. But I do think there is that I can sort of, I suppose I was accessing the care and attention that we have to give to her because it was probably on a par with what they had to deal with, actually. This kind of constant threat of danger and of death. And a kind of near fatal brush with some issue with your child. You know, you're kind of constantly watching them. I mean, they must have been doing that because a cold could be fatal. You know, they got diphtheria or typhus. There was the plague, what we now call the plague. The thing is, if my kid gets a sore throat or a dislocated shoulder, I just say it's absolutely fine. We'll just go down. And it seems very minor to us now because obviously we've dealt with it. And I'm sure this is true of any family who deals with, a medical condition. But it does mean that I am thinking about it all the time. Yeah, all the time, every moment of the day. I'm thinking, is she safe? Is she in danger? Is there anything that could be happening? Have I got it pinned down? Have I got it covered? Has she got her medication? Is she with someone who knows what to do if the worst would happen?
Yeah.
But you don't. I mean, I think we're just used to it now. You know, and we walk into a bus, we walk into another room, and even when I walked in this room, and she's not even with me. I can't switch off that part of my brain thinking, is there anything in here that might give her any problems?
Isn't that interesting?
Is there anything I shouldn't touch in case I carry it back to her? So, but it becomes a second nature after a while. I think of it a bit like tinnitus, which I also have. It's always there, but sometimes it's sort of more noticeable than others. And also, I think the kind of parameters change. Obviously, I've got quite young children. I've also got a teenager. And, your worry about a young child is different. You worry about them falling out of a tree or, hurting themselves or, getting some kind of illness. But for the teenager, the whole parameters completely shift. And there's a whole other kind of set of worries that you have to contend with, which is all fun.
What we're saying is we recommend motherhood. It's really good for your anxiety.
Oh no, but this is But I think there's a kind of. I think you have to separate the anxiety. I think you have got to tamp down the anxiety, and you've got to think of the kind of practical solution to it. I mean, especially with my daughter with the medical condition, it's all about taking practical action. There's no point in feeling anxious about it, and that's actually not good for you because you're going to transmit that anxiety to her. You've got to remember that, particularly with young children, that the mother's and the child's emotions are on a loop and they're looking at you to see how you're reacting. So I think, you've got to kind of not be anxious, but you've got to be practical and you've got to be vigilant. I think that's a different thing.
She was talking there about that kind of, she used the word atavistic, that kind of primal connection that sort of when the sort of hormones take over, your body takes over, and you will know that feeling when you have a baby, which is that you would genuinely throw yourself in front of a car to protect it. Did that sort of chime with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel it, even in the home every day where, they're fighting each other. You're kind of like, no, you've got to keep them safe. Yeah, but thank you for explaining the word, because that was good. I heard it, I was like, that's one to Google later.
Every day's a school day.
Thank you. It'll go in the next book.
Yeah. As well, she was that thing of, obviously, in stark terms for her, because of her daughter's allergies, that sort of thing of constantly looking around for threat. But it is a weird primal thing which you have with your kids. And I suppose any loved one, which is that you're looking out for the potential problems. But is there a way in which sometimes we forget that you can't legislate for everything? You can't. You've probably baby-proofed your house, and it'll be the one corner that you haven't put a sticky thing on.
The night before I went into labour with Max, Buddy fell off. He literally stepped up on the sofa. We were literally about to go up to bed. For some reason, he stepped on the sofa. His foot slipped. He fell straight back into the coffee table, split his head open, and we needed to go to hospital. So, and then I went into labour while we were in the waiting room. You literally you can't stop them hurting themselves. No. And me and Tom, we always find there's one of us who's encouraging or letting them do what they want physically. Because I think sometimes not letting them do stuff physically is actually a hindrance, because they've got to get to know their balance. They've got to get to know how they move and what they can do and they can't do. And then the other adult in the situation is always being a little bit more cautious. So I feel like we pick our roles as and when they're in a certain situation. But you can't wrap them up. and there are going to be things that happen. And I mean, I don't know, the boys just run around so much. It's so hard to, as much as I would love for them just to sit down and read books all day long, it's just they've got so much energy that they need to use up. And that does mean that they fall over, and, you know, quickly I scoop them up, hold them really close, and then just that moment where you kind of pull them away from you to see where the pain is, what they've done. Oh, there's no blood. Oh, it's a bump. Oh, you're fine. You know. But interestingly, I find hurt and pain in terms of love harder to deal with than the physical.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So the emotional.
Yeah. And I don't know whether it's a boy thing, whether it's having boy. There's a lot of talk about mental health with boys, how they don't talk about their feelings, and which I guess growing up in our household, hopefully they would, because we talk about it, but you just never know. I think it's the almost the silent hurt and pain that I worry about more, because it's you just don't, you know, with any of it you never know what's coming, but you don't know what's going on in someone's head, whereas if they've got a broken leg, they've got a broken leg, and you can fix it.
It's sort of almost easier to fix. And there's a
Yeah.
weird thing, because they need a bit of rough and tumble, and they need a bit of freedom as well.
Yeah.
I saw this thing which was about going through the different generations and asking them to look at a map of their house and to basically circle the areas where they would play in their childhood.
Interesting.
And if you go back a couple of generations, the circles go miles away from the house. They go down to the woods, down to the river, down to wherever it was where they used to play. And as time goes on, that circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Well, I can remember, you know, growing up, suddenly it was that, oh, you can't possibly let your kids go, you know, what, or something on the news. What was that parent thinking? Like, well, we do that.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to do that anymore. You know, all of a sudden that it just does make your circle smaller, what you're allowed to do. But I think back now, I mean, I was sent down to the shops at 9. I remember it being my first trip on my own to the shops. And I think I had to get something like cupcake cases, something really simple.
Classic.
And it's classic. But it must have been about a mile.
Right.
And I was just sent. And I knew it was a big thing. I remember feeling really grown up.
Yeah.
But now, thinking that's only, well, Buzz is about to turn 6, so that's only 3. I would not send him down there. But even school, I used to go to Sylvia's in London.
Yeah.
So travelling from Essex to London every day from 13 on my own, you know, and just kind of
completely unaccompanied on public transport.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I've just read Motherwell by Deborah Orr, who sadly passed away last year, and it's her memoir. And the bit I think that was most poignant to me was about her youth and growing up, and as you say, all that kind of responsibility that was given to her on this estate that she was living in, and how much freedom she was given to just kind of go out for the day, and if you get into trouble you will learn from it. And it's such a stark contrast from,
it really is,
what we do now, and as you say, what you'll be letting the boys do, and I'm sure if I have children what I would be doing as well.
Honestly, I can remember at 13, we didn't have phones or anything. Me and my friend went for a walk in the woods, could not find our way back. Ended up walking, got to a road, had no idea where we were, didn't have phones. We had to literally hail, like, the next car that came past, we had to say, look, we live here, can you take us?
Yeah.
But now, do you know what I mean? Imagine, like, you just kind of go, no, I will track you.
Yeah.
You know, I will put a chip inside your arm, and I will know where you are all the time.
It's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you would never say, you can't imagine a modern parent kind of going, so you go to the woods with your friend, and if you get lost, just flag a car down and tell them where we live, and they'll bring you home, because you would think that would just be mad advice.
But isn't it crazy when you think as well? So we're not letting kids do as much as they did because of fear of getting hurt.
Yeah.
We're not letting them go out as far in case someone takes them, when there's so many restrictions that we're putting on them, but the expectations are somehow higher. So it's a weird place to be. So I do think you have to elasticate a little bit and let them have something. You know,
attach them to a bungee cord and let them
go,
wander free.
let them fly.
Yes. It is, of course, it's one of those things. It's so much easier to say than to do. But I think my kids are now 12 and 10, and the sort of freedoms that they have gained in that time, it's weird how each time it's a big step, it feels a really big thing, and you're terrified, and then of course it's fine. And then you move on to the next thing. So.
It's even so on holiday we go somewhere the same place most years, and it's been interesting seeing how slightly older children are just given that extra bit of freedom to walk to the other side of the beach, or you know, whereas we know that we are still in full on mode where we're watching them constantly like a hawk, or we're with them.
Yeah.
But then you look at other parents and you're like, oh, you're at the reading book stage. That's interesting. So in a few years I'm coming back and I'm reading a book on the beach. My kids can play. But it's just, I find it really interesting looking at the different ages when they're together in a situation like that, and seeing actually it's those little steps, that little bit of responsibility that's given over time, and then eventually it's stretched and they're a fully fledged adult.
The idea, I remember when I became a parent, I thought, I have time to read. As a stay-at-home dad, I'll be able to read so many books. And of course, you don't get to read a word because you are either changing nappies or asleep. Those are the only two things. And having now reached a stage where I can read books, it's amazing how quickly that happens. You know, you kind of go, oh my God, I can actually almost have a life again.
And I imagine you must go on holiday and everyone just sits down and reads at some point.
No? Kind of. Although, well, yeah, I suppose it's there's a bit of this thing. We live in an age of screens, don't we? So people have their own things that they want to do, and as you say, you don't all have to be together all the time.
Yeah.
Still, of course, because of course you're on holiday in a place that you don't know, so there's a bit of kind of yes, you can play outside, and I will stand vigil at the window and watch every single movement, and then of course you can let it go. You know, it's fine. Baby steps for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
We've mentioned books. It's time now, of course, to hear from our booksellers who are going to give us some book recommendations based on this theme of motherhood. Let's see what they've got for us.
Hi, I'm Martha from Sheffield, and as I'm due to give birth to twins in a few weeks' time, then the theme of motherhood is one that's close to my heart at the moment. I'd like to recommend Liz Berry's extraordinary, moving and insightful pocket-sized collection, The Republic of Motherhood. It says everything that I'd like to say about this wonderful, completely overwhelming thing, and much more besides.
Hi, I'm Katrina from Glasgow, and my recommendation on the topic of motherhood is The Unit by Nini Holmqvist. It's about a future where those who are deemed useless to society are retired to the titular unit. Here the childless are worthless and those who are mothers are not. So those without children are treated to carefully controlled luxury as long as they submit to living the remainder of their days, allowing their bodies to be used to heal those who are deemed more worthy of life. It's a classic dystopian tale, and the language used is scalpel sharp and really eerily beautiful, and it's a really interesting way to explore the concept of motherhood and the impact of not being or not desiring motherhood also.
So there we go, some book recommendations to keep you busy. G, it's been so brilliant to talk to you about your book.
It's been lovely. I honestly love talking to you two.
Oh,
Holly, I've met you a few times over the years. You're a delight.
Thank you. I can say the same about you.
Bit of a love in here. No, it's really good. As I say, I think the honesty with which you talk about motherhood has always been one of the things that's made your books and your podcast such a success. But I think there's a charm to this book. Because of the fact that they're letters, there is so much love in it. So I hope you're feeling quite happy with how it sort of turned out.
I am. It's always that anxious bit, though, isn't it, before people read it? Externally, you're like, oh God, like letters to my foof, you know, like, is that going to go down well? I don't know.
Don't forget to leave your reviews on waterstones.com. G would love to hear from you. So in our next episode, we are going to be delving into memory. Nikki Gerard will be telling us what dementia teaches us about love. Emma McBride takes us to strange hotel rooms, and Mira Soda talks about how food evokes memory so strongly. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, G. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.
Thank you.